Hello. If everyone could make their way back to their seats, we'll get started on the next set of talks. Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Jordan.
How you doing?
Very, very good.
That's us. I really, really, really want to know if there's going to be music on the next slide. So either it's going to be silent and we're going to stand here like, what do we do now? Or there's going to be music and we'll do the same thing. We'll still stand here going, what do we do now? No music. I'm actually kind of glad there's no music. This is Monzo's growth of card usage basically since inception. We had the Game of Thrones music playing over the top of it to kind of give the idea of like conquering the Seven Kingdoms. But when I listened to the music back, I just felt like disappointment and emptiness after the last season. So I'm kind of glad that it didn't play. So here we are today. We have 2.3 million customers. If we go back in time a year, we had about 750,000 customers. Right now, we add about 250,000 customers per month. So it took 4 years to reach 1 million customers. And at our current growth rate, we add about 1 million customers every 4 months. This sounds great, but we're not here to self-congratulate. If we want to get to 30 million customers, it still takes quite a long time. So we're going to talk about growth and how we're sort of accelerating that. However, before we get too far into the void, I'm Jordan. I'm a product director here. I joined about 2 years ago.
I'm Fu. I'm a design director here. I joined 6 months ago. So we're here to talk about growth. But what is growth? What do we actually mean when we talk about growth? So fundamentally, growth is around building a business. First thing first, we started this talk about talking about customer numbers, and we talked about how we've reached 2.3 million customers, which is awesome, which is great. But when we talk about growth at Monzo, it's a little bit more nuanced than that. Most importantly, we care about customers using Monzo. We care about making sure that we're making money work for people, and we care that people are getting value out of Monzo. So when we talk about growth at Monzo, we are talking about increasing the numbers of people who are using our product. We are talking about making sure that we are building things which help people get the most out of Monzo. And most importantly, we're talking about how fast we're doing that. We care a lot about how quickly we are growing those numbers, not just the absolute numbers from a day-to-day basis, but that we are putting more fuel into the tank, and that rocket ship is really, really, really taking off.
Yeah, if we were stood here saying, we've got 2.3 million customers, how great, but all of them signed up and never used Monzo, that wouldn't be anything to celebrate, really. So to start working on growth, we have to have a goal in mind. This seems super, super simplistic, but it's actually a little bit harder than that, because what do you optimize for? Do we care about number of app installs? Do we care about people signed up, card transactions, number of golden tickets sent, retention? All of these things seem very important. So we have to wrap this up into a super, super simple metric that can permeate throughout the company, and everyone can understand what we're working towards and if we're doing well or not. The clearer the goal, the easier it is for us to prioritize and make better decisions. For Airbnb, I think this was like number of nights booked. That's what they really cared about, number of nights booked through the platform. For YouTube, it was viewers. I think Slack cared about revenue. Given that we care about people using Monzo, we care about weekly active users. We care about people using it every day. And we define a weekly active user as someone that's used their card in the last 7 days. We want to build things that in the product, around the product, that drive up this number, people using Monzo every single week. But it's hard to think about something that drives up weekly active users. If I said, let's build a feature that drives up weekly active users, where do you start? It's kind of difficult to think about. Weekly active users itself is not really directly actionable. So instead, we're going to find levers that drill down into weekly active users and break it down into its component parts, so we can start thinking of things and making changes that can impact it. By the way, if you use Slack for work, you have to download the cowboy hat emoji pack. They're incredible. It's totally revolutionized my life. It's amazing. That's not related to growth at all. So one way to do this is to put yourselves into the shoes of the customer. What sort of journey does someone go through when they find out about Monzo? Where do they find out about it? What has their friend told them? Were they in a pub and they saw the card and they were like, that's cool? Or were they at a restaurant and they were sort of splitting the bill and they were like, quick, download it, you can send me some money real fast. And then they go, okay, cool, lots of my friends have told me about this, maybe I'll do it. And then do they Google Monzo? Do they go to the App Store? What does the App Store say? What do the photos look like? When they sign up, what's their first experience? I think there's a video plays and there's some of the Monzo staff using their cards, and then you go into the product and you get to some point, you have to take a selfie video and go, hi, I'm Jordan. And that's maybe embarrassing if you're in public. Then you have to add money from your legacy bank, and sometimes they require you to have one of those weird things in real life, and you've got to put it in your laptop. I don't know. Haven't used a legacy bank in a while. But if we walk through, you realize all of these moments are things we can use to reduce friction and influence growth. We can make this page more compelling. We can incentivize people to let their friends know more about Monzo. So if we look at some examples and break weekly active users down into its component parts, it starts to look a bit like this. And it gets a little bit easier as you go along. So weekly active users splits down into new users, retained customers, churned users, and returning users. This is a little bit simpler now. I can think a little bit more clearly. If you split new users down, you have organic, referral, adverts, and etc. Lots of things make up new users. For this chat, we're only going to talk about things in the product. Has anyone ever sent a golden ticket to a friend? No one? Did anyone sign up through a golden ticket when you joined Monzo? Cool, so everyone's relatively familiar with a golden ticket. Okay, so on the left, you have golden tickets from 2018. And on the right, you have golden tickets from today. Does anybody know two major changes that are different between these two things that might have had an impact on our growth? Go on. Personalization. Shit, I wasn't hoping you'd get that one. Okay, yep, that's one of them. Anything else? Get a fiver. Cool. So these two things are changes that happened that materially impact our growth rate. If you look along the bottom now, you can break referrals down into actionable levers. So you can influence weekly active users by changing the conversion rate of the invite. Adding personalization improved this by 15%. You see this thing, you trust it a little more. That's my friend's face, and that's their name. That makes sense. You can improve the number of people someone sends an invitation to, or the percentage of people that even bother sharing an invite at all after they've joined Monzo. In the instance of the £5 rewards, so a dual-sided incentive program, this drove up the bottom three, on the three on the right. The percentage of people sharing increased, the conversion of the invite doubled, and the number of people that invite increased as well. The personalization only impacted the one on the bottom right. These are the kind of experiments you can run that will dial back up, and each of them succeeding means we're now growing at a faster rate. We've impacted weekly active users.
Cool. So we've got a growth bird here. We'll explain this a little bit later.
So they might have seen this already. Simon, did you show them the bird? Yeah, it's good, cool. It's not just a weird bird. We're going to talk a little bit about how you can apply this philosophy to any sort of growth problem. Sometimes at Monzo, we don't just work on driving customer numbers. We care about things slightly lower in the funnel. So if we're getting customers that don't use Monzo, that's bad. But if we get customers that add their salary to Monzo and use Monzo for more things, that's really great. It's better for us, they're getting more value from it, and it's better for Monzo as a company. So Phil's going to chat a little bit about how we can apply this philosophy to other kind of problems too.
So let's step through that experience again from the point of a customer. We care about focusing on one problem. We care about understanding the pain points and the things that a customer will go through and experiencing that. And we care about thinking about what's the highest opportunity thing that we can do to change this goal. So cycling a little bit back, I think Simon's introduced the example that we're going to go through. But one of the key things about making money work for everyone is that we found out that the more of your financial lives that you have in Monzo, the more value it gives you, the more things that you can do. And so we take forward. One of the things that we wanted to do was look at how we can sort of drive salaried. So starting from the very first point, we can talk about when people first find out about Monzo, we can tell them a little bit about why it'd be good to get your salaried into Monzo. We can send little nudges along the way. So throughout the whole month, we can send you little messages to incentivize you to put your salary in. Or we can look at the point when you actually get your salary paid in, which is an amazing moment of sort of delight. Which takes us on to the growth bird, or the metaphor as the early bird gets the worm. So the idea is that we can help drive growth by really improving and making a fantastic customer experience for something that typically is a little bit loaded with friction. You would get your salary in the early mornings. It'll come through. You don't really know what's happening there. But if you were to get that a day early, you can actually use your money and spend it. And when you get your money, it's suddenly this great point of excitement. So the fundamental thinking here is that we think about this as an opportunity point. We want to run an experiment on it. We want to look at this point in time in which it's a great way to amplify that whole experience by showing a meaningful, delightful interaction. And if we've done our job right, it's something that you talk about, something that you find a lot of value about. We're solving a real customer problem. You tell your friends about it, which is awesome. And this is another way of diving really deep into a problem in which we do something for the user, but it also adds rocket fuel to the overall goal of increasing growth for Monzo as a whole.
So this is all very well and good. It sounds very theoretical. There was a nice graph where some things came out of another thing. But how does this actually work in practice?
So the good thing is it's not just Jordan and I. I mean, I think it'd be awful if it's just Jordan and I try to focus on this one problem.
Yeah, it'd be like this talk.
Indeed. But the great thing about how we work and how we think at Monzo is that we care a lot about teams all focusing together, working together, and bringing their individual expertise onto focus on a problem. And this is more so in growth than anywhere else. Growth fundamentally is a team sport. Everyone has the sort of same philosophy about thinking about the headline number. Everyone has the same philosophy about driving towards impact. Everyone has the same philosophy about learning really quickly. And so when we start looking at how we approach a problem, we are bringing the different expertise of marketeers, designers, engineers, and we're putting the goal of driving growth and the team first, ahead of building the most beautiful experience. We want to make sure that we build an experience which gets that value to customers as soon as possible. When it comes to building the full product, we want to make sure that we build in something which is on the right track. So we want to optimize towards growth and sort of speed. And when we look at sizing the opportunity, we want to make sure that it's something that has the biggest possible reach and has the biggest possible impact towards that headline goal that we talked about, increasing weekly active customers. And when we looked at it through the lens of salaried, increasing the number of people who would put their salary into Monzo.
So you can simplify this down into sort of 3 steps, which is maybe an oversimplification, but I'm going to say it anyway. Step 1 is digging into the data that exists, quant data, to identify areas of opportunity or problems. You look into your growth model and you go, where could we be doing better, or where are we doing a bad job? Once you've highlighted these areas, you chat to customers and figure out why these are problems or why these are opportunities. Really spend some time with people and figure out, why are we doing badly here? How could we drive this up a bit further? And then finally, you work with your team and their creative intuition to solve these problems in a really elegant and delightful way. So we are able to actually solve these problems or seize these opportunities that are available to us.
The key thing there is that we use data, we use research, we use our intuition. They help give us all a really informed place to sort of start on from. But then we ruthlessly look to invalidate or validate that as quickly as possible so that we're learning and adding more information for the next set of things that we do. This concept of experimentation as a way of learning runs really deep through the way we work. And the most important thing is that if we are to do things well, then we are learning quickly. And we believe that the company or the team who learns the fastest will win. In the grand scheme of things, the faster you learn, the faster the feedback loop is, the more you succeed. Which means that when it comes to experimentations and the experiments that we run, we want to be as bold as possible. And that comes with a couple of consequences, which is not everyone is going to succeed. If every single experiment succeeded, then either we are playing our bets too conservatively, or we're taking and putting too much effort into them, and we're not learning fast enough. And when we go back to the philosophy that we have at play, the company or the team who learns the fastest, and the company or team who learns the best, we want to really maximize that throughput. It also means that from when we build stuff and when we think about what we work on, that we will be doing things that will make us uncomfortable. If we're not a little bit uncomfortable when we start shipping or start releasing some of the things that we have out, then we've probably sort of taken too long. And when it comes to the things that you'll sort of start seeing in your products, whether you're in one of the experiments or you sort of see what some of your friends may be sort of talking about, some of those may be things which, on the surface of it, might seem a little bit strange, but it's all towards the goal of learning quickly as possible, and all towards the goal of doing things which we hope we can either learn to drive the metrics in terms of how we can add more value for our customer base, or we can learn a lot more faster in order to do so.
So why is growth important? Why are we talking about this at all outside of the obvious?
Growth is really interesting because it helps us build a better product quicker. When the more you grow and the bigger your customer base, the more opportunities it lets you do. So if we talk back to the point of place we are right now, we have 2 million users, and that gives us a hell of a lot of opportunities to do stuff. We can do stuff such as TV campaigns, things that would be totally impractical about a year ago, or probably even sort of 6 months ago. I think that would be something that might not necessarily be the highest impact thing. We can do endeavors such as growing into different areas. So internet expansion, that's something that makes a lot of sort of sense now, but 2 years ago is probably not the most viable thing to do. It also helps us be better at doing the things that we operate. So the greater the amount of customers you have, the more you can learn from your customers, the more experiments you can run at any given time, and the faster those experiments will learn. So growth really, really sort of supercharges learning and supercharges opportunities in terms of what you can do.
It also gives us greater defensibility. So the larger our user base, the more we can leverage features and the more we can rely on habits. I think that the switching cost once a habit has been formed is consistently underestimated. So growth is sort of a moat that protects us from competitors and allows us new opportunities that we wouldn't really have otherwise had.
Growth is cool. So big numbers are cool numbers, and big numbers and a big sort of a product which lots of people are using. That's an amazing sort of signal to everyone. It brings in new talent, so it allows us to hire more specialism and hire more people who can make us better. It can bring a lot of attention towards us in the press and media. More people are aware of us without us having to do any effort at all. And that's the sort of thing which grows and grows. Growth begets more growth. Ultimately, a growing product and a growing customer base and a growing customer base that you care about is a signal that, of many, that you are doing something well and you're on the right track. And the more you sort of focus towards that, the better you are.
Yeah, the best companies are built on a system of compounding loops, basically. And the returns you get from those loops are typically a function of the existing user base. So the bigger you are, the bigger you end up. And the bigger we are, the more we can do to make money work for everyone and increase the potential value of Monzo. So what should you take away from this chart apart from growth is good? Hopefully you'll understand a little bit more about how we work internally and how we use things in the product to accelerate growth. We want to use the next year to continue digging into the growth model, running experiments, and solving real problems to supercharge and accelerate our ascent towards 10 million customers. We'll keep using this over the next year to progress the size of the customer base and continue to increase the curve of our weekly active users. Thank you for taking this journey with us. And if I can make one request, it's that you send 18 golden tickets on the way home today. Next up, we have Hugo and Tom. But sure, first a short intermission until 3:30. Thank you.
We're going to get started in a couple minutes, so just settle in.
Come on.
Hello. Hello, everybody. Shall we introduce ourselves? I'm Hugo. I'm VP of Design.
I'm Tom. I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO here. I'm delighted to see you all on such a warm, sunny day. You choose to come and take refuge in the air-conditioned office of Monzo. But it's amazing to see so many people here and also on the stream and in various locations around the country. So we've got about half an hour now. We're doing an Ask Me Anything, which will be exciting. I think we have about 10 or 12 questions lined up. And we'll try and whiz through those. And if we manage to do so, we'll take questions from all of you here. I think we have a roving mic around. So without further ado, let's dive in.
Let's do it. Let's see. Boom. I think this one is for you.
Yeah.
At what point, let's read them because
Okay.
at what point did you think, you know what, I'm going to start a bank? What happened to you, basically? Is there a story to be told?
Yeah. So before Monzo, with two other guys from university, I started a company called Go Cardless, which was, or at least became a payment processor, a direct debit payment processor, collecting recurring payments for small, medium, and now very large businesses. And it was really, really interesting for a number of reasons, but I wasn't very, very passionate about direct debit processing for small and medium businesses. That's, as strange as that sounds. And I really wanted to do something that that kind of impacted, or, that I cared about on sort of day-to-day basis. And a bank account was something that I had to use and all my friends and family had to use, and they uniformly sucked. And doing this sort of Go Cardless experience taught me that if you start from scratch and build your own technology, you can kind of unravel a lot of the layers of crap that goes around banking. I, like everyone, I think, had just assumed that banking, especially my banking app, was complicated and clunky because banking itself had to be complicated and clunky. And actually building a card has taught me that it's just not really true. Payments move around and basically entries in a ledger, and there's no reason they can't be instantaneous. They can't come with sort of all of the data around it that makes sense to you rather than a kind of garbled string of numbers and letters. And so I really wanted to do something that my friends and family could use and worked a lot more like WhatsApp or Spotify than NatWest. So yeah, that was it really. And Thrive, who led our Series C, I was in New York working with Jonas on a dating website before Monzo. And I remember very clearly sitting down with one of the partners at Thrive as this sort of dating website was winding up. And he said, "What do you want to do next?" And I said, I really think I want to start a bank. And he sort of looked at me slightly incredulously, but sort of shrugged and went, "Sounds pretty cool. If you ever do start a bank, come back and we'd love to invest." And then 2 or 3 years later, I did, and they did, and the rest is history.
Let's go to the next. Has your decision-making process, or ours, I guess, changed as the company has grown? And if we are more risk-averse based on the number of
Why don't you
customers
take
we have? I think we are, and I think that's good. So from a point of view of design, the kind of things we do, we try to play them a bit safer. Also, we are very cautious on doing things that maybe they start for, like we roll them out for a small number of customers, and then as we get confident that is the right thing, we increase. So we are more diligent with that, and I think it's good. At a deeper sense of how we are willing to do things in a better way, I think it's the same. I haven't seen change on actually trying to really fix the problem and not play it safe at a kind of like conceptual level. So it's more maybe in the operations, in how we do it. Like I think we are more professional, to be honest.
Yeah, one of the Jonas and I both love talking in metaphors, and they get very tiresome. I think if you have to hear them over and over again. This is probably the first time you've heard it, so I'm gonna roll out one of my metaphors.
Not me.
You know which one's coming. So I think my current favorite metaphor is a Formula One car and the pit stop of a Formula One car. And if you've ever seen these either on TV or in person, it's amazing that you've got this incredible, well-honed machine that comes in, and you've got a team of 20 or 30 people and more behind the scenes, all trained to do a pit stop, replace tires, refuel in under 3 seconds, and you're out, you're racing again. And it's just an unbelievable team effort, and the amount of precision and control that goes into creating this incredibly fast-moving vehicle is unbelievable. Sticking with motorsports, you may also have seen drag racing, which is basically you get a go-kart and strap a rocket to the back of it and press go, and it just goes. And the problem with running a drag racing car is if you come to a corner, you're fucked, basically. The whole thing just like erupts in a ball of fire because there's not a huge amount. They go really, really fast until they hit a corner or a speed bump or they have to change direction. And then I think you find out then you're not in control. And so for Monzo, I don't want to slow down, but I want to go fast in the Formula One sense. Absolutely in control. The precision engineering, everyone drilled, who knows, everyone knows exactly what they need to do at every point in time to get the pit stop under 3 seconds. Not the going fast of like lighting a match on the bloody rocket strapped to a go-kart, because you end up making huge, huge mistakes. And at our scale, when we're looking after people's life savings, terrible stuff happens. So I think we have changed our approach slightly, but I don't think it necessarily means we have to go too much slower.
Great metaphor. Never heard it before. Excellent. What does a VP look like as a role, and what way is it different to other seniors? I can give my point of view on this. So I think about it like Dean Nash, one of our executives, he told me something like, I was promoted to VP a few months ago, and he came to say something like, from this point on, you are not a designer in like, I don't know how to say, like the most expert designer in the company, but you are like a leader with a design background. That's how I try to think about it. So it's about kind of trying to think on the things that are more impactful at a company level, at a business level. So to try to do the better for our customers and our investors in a way that is not necessarily through a design lens constantly, but to actually be a bit wider. So I think that's a bit of that. Also a lot about, I guess, kind of like trying to set the tone of like what great looks like or how to conduct ourselves, all that. Like I think I take it maybe a bit more seriously than before, because maybe some people look up to me, my team, and all that stuff. So yeah, that's how I think about it. How do you think about this?
Yeah, so the background here is we have sort of C-level executives who form our executive committee. There are about approximately 10 of us. And then the rung below that are VPs, and we have 5 or 6 at the moment. We're bolstering that kind of rank. And then the rank below that we call directors, basically. And I agree with Hugo. The move from... So our directors really are the people who you can give entire problems to, and they will own it end to end and are really responsible for the delivery of the solution to that problem, to run the team, and to deliver that over weeks or months or even 6 months. Kind of a really chunky project to actually... I think they're the kind of the leaders day to day who are kind of delivering projects. VPs for me are just a little bit more operate at a kind of more meta level of abstraction. They're looking at the organization, looking at the structures and the people and the ways of working and the tools and the processes to make sure that the people who are kind of actually delivering the work are sort of fully able to do so. They have the right tools, they're unblocked, they're kind of pointing in the right direction. So it's an interesting mindset shift to go from someone who's like doing, delivering, really fully responsible for delivery of the thing every day, to someone who's just a little bit more abstract, looking at the organization, the machine that then builds the end Monzo product. Does that make sense?
This one is for me. Go away. It says how much input I still have on the actual design of the product, and if I'm hands-on, and if it's a part of my job. So it depends. I think I'm not. Like, I kind of design through spreadsheets kind of thing, right? Like, my job is more like talking with people, communication, and keeping people productive and happy. I sometimes get involved when I have more context, just because I've been here longer. So
Great.
I've been here since day one. So particularly things that are structural in the app. So some of the changes that Beth and Bruno were showing before, I get involved on that because I think I can add some value. And the same with our cards. So all these like Monzo Plus cards, stuff like that, I get involved. But I'm not usually actually designing things. Our design team is way better than I was as a designer. So that wouldn't make sense. It's more about maybe in a whiteboard, maybe inspiring someone, or kind of unlocking problems, that kind of stuff. So it's quite cool actually, because then things happen in parallel. It's super nice. Yeah, you don't know what that is. You're not a designer.
Somewhat, we were talking about the design of the new Monzo business cards. Do you remember this through last week? No, Monzo credit cards. It was Monzo credit cards. This is going to upset you. So we'll give the designers 3 or 4 weeks, and it'll say Monzo, and then next to it in lighter letters it will say credit. And I was like, ha ha ha, aren't I clever? And then everyone went quiet, and I was like, is that actually what we've done? No, honestly, design is the skill that I have least, I think, of all of the different skills going into this company. And so I have huge respect for the designers, because I absolutely could not do their job, except for the Monzo credit card, which we're exploring and it's not an announcement.
All right.
Definitely exploring.
Very good. What will be the next country after the US, and if the app is built for multiple languages?
So 95% of our focus is on the UK. Really 95% of the people, the time, the money, the effort is on the UK. 5% right now is the US, and 0% is any other country, being really frank. The choice basically would be either Europe or sort of Commonwealth countries, basically, Canada or Australia. And that's not a decision we've made. Right now it's 95% UK, 5% US. Is the app built for multiple languages?
I can answer that if you want. So localization, it's think about it in terms of like multiple languages and multiple currencies. At a design level, it is like we've tried to do everything that works, like right to left, left to right, different currencies, numbers that are super long. Like all that stuff is covered. The app itself is not built that way, but it will be a project. We'll do it. We are doing it in the US. We'll do it in different places as we need to. Doesn't worry me too much. The thing that I think worries me of this is that I'm actually understanding how the service needs to run in different places. Like honestly, changing a pound sign here and there, like that's very easy. The tricky bit here is to say, like direct debits that doesn't exist in other places, right? Like what's the equivalent, how that works, what cycles of money people use. Do they use cash a lot? How do they get paid? Like all those things are really the really cool thing, and we are learning that in the US right now. So yeah, the technical bit really, I think it's gonna be on Rails. The way more interesting is the other one, which I hope also will do great, but yeah, it's more uncertain, I guess. Very good. So this question is it adding more third-party integrations the way for us to work, or if we are going to build things by ourselves and then migrate for services and technology?
Should I have a shot at this?
Please.
So I think from a technical infrastructure and payments infrastructure point of view, we have been bringing more and more in-house over the last few years, and we are happier and happier the more we bring in-house, frankly. So you may remember 2 years ago or so, we had a lot of problems with our card processor. When we were on prepaid, we had a number of outages that we just weren't happy with, and we weren't really in control of, honestly. And so we rebuilt that MasterCard processor in-house, got it certified, and now, touch wood, it's extremely stable and resilient and high-performing. We had an outage about 2 or 3 weeks ago when faster payments for a proportion of faster payments for about 8 hours were delayed or rejected. Again, a very similar thing happened, that a third-party piece of software that sat between us and the payment scheme basically took an outage. And we made the commitment to rebuild that piece of software in-house and, again, get it recertified. And we hope it'll be more resilient, but in any case, we'll have more control of it, which I think makes us more comfortable. So from a technical and payments infrastructure perspective, more and more in-house, and as we go around the world, that will remain the same. From a product and kind of customer point of view, we've talked a lot about Monzo being a kind of hub into which you plug all of the spokes that are your financial life. And we've been relatively slow on that, honestly. I think the best example is savings accounts. So we now have 2 or 3 and soon more coming providers offering good interest rates, much better than you get on the high street banks. And as we go kind of vertical by vertical, whether it's insurance or investments or mortgage switching, I think we need to make a decision whether in that particular vertical it makes sense for us to either do it ourselves, to choose a single kind of best-in-class provider, as we've done with foreign transfers, we use TransferWise, or whether it's useful to have a broad range of providers. So for stuff like car insurance, different providers target different population niches, and actually it's quite useful to have a number of different insurance providers so that each of our customer segments can get a great deal, whether you're a 19-year-old young man or a 63-year-old woman. You tend to get different pricing from different providers, and so plugging in a number actually is pretty useful. So on that kind of marketplace approach, I think we do need to take it vertical by vertical and see what makes sense.
Right. What's the one thing that we miss from those days when we were 50 people staff? Now we are about 1,000, to put in perspective. What do you miss?
I actually read your answer, and it's just really small letters.
We have speaker notes, but they're like smaller than like 1 pixel.
Font size 4.
Oh, yeah. Do you want to steal it?
What do I miss? I know I won't steal it. You go that.
Okay, so what I miss... oh, it's getting bigger. Oh, excellent, thank you.
Miraculously got bigger.
So knowing everybody's names. This is the largest company I've ever worked at. And it's the first place where I work in a place that I don't know everybody. So there's something really... Like, it's weird because the way we hire, we care a lot about our values. So people are typically like very similar in terms of how nice they are. So it's like a Monzo person, but you don't know their name. It's a bit weird. And then having lunch pretty much every day together, everybody, and having socials. So we do socials from time to time. And we could, when we were less than 50, or when we were like 20 or 15 people, go to a restaurant all together. That doesn't exist anymore, right? And it's like, oh, I miss it a bit, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, communication, for me, I think it's an extension of that. If you're all sitting around a table or in a single room, getting everyone on the same page and then pointing in the same direction, mixing my metaphors there, is very natural. You sort of achieve this mind meld almost when you're kind of 15 or 20 people quite easily. You cross 100 and communication has to become much more deliberate. You get to 1,000 and you have to sort of structure your organization in certain ways, and then and we call those collectives. So we have 10 different collectives. Within each of those collectives, some are more than 100 people. And so again, you're having to be deliberate about communication even within that collective. And then cross-company communication becomes even harder. And so you just have to think really, really hard about the processes, the kind of rituals, the tools you use to get everyone on the same page. If someone like Hugo or myself feel like we've said it 50 times, we probably have said it 50 times, but the person hearing it might be hearing it only for the first or second time. And so that is quite an unnatural feeling. But that's what I miss.
Oh, these are questions from each other to
design. I wish I had design.
Yeah,
and also,
you cannot use that.
I wish I could sing or dance, ideally both, and I can do neither. It's like part of my brain has been removed.
Okay. Would you let us be the judge of? No, it's all right. Do you love this question? So the question is, in case someone is watching it and they cannot see the image, it says, where did hot coral, the color of our cards, came from? And what's the real story?
So Hugo always wears an item of clothing that is hot coral?
This is not hot coral, this is salmon. Okay. You know how...
This is why I'm not a designer.
So... Tom tells this story of that they had some trainers that were hot color. That's bullshit.
Like, what color were they?
Okay, forget about that story. How this actual thing happened. Have you seen? It was a mix of many things. So the hot coral cards, this thing that they look so bright, it's because it's a very special ink, okay, that reflects ultraviolet light and whatnot. That on its own is not common, or it wasn't that common, and it wasn't that obvious that you could have that on a credit card or in a banking card. So when we started Monzo at the beginning, we had the prepaid. Well, we were Mondo. We had the prepaid, and we were looking at catalogs of the kind of stuff you could do in plastic cards. Banking cards, now they are way better, and I think we've helped on that. They used to be quite tacky, like like this kind of imagery that they would have and all that. So most of the options were like that. But in gift cards, people were doing better stuff, particularly fashion stores. So this was Debenhams. I think Debenhams had a range of neon colors, and our provider had them. And it's like, oh, actually, you can do these. They didn't have hot coral, but they had like some pink, and that connected with something I had done in the past. And we said, okay, this could be a good idea. The idea behind was a bit like, have you seen like prototypes of cars when they have them on the street, but they are not road legal yet? They usually have like very, very flashy colors, because the idea is at the beginning, it was a beta, or it was an alpha. So that design wasn't meant to stay, in all honesty. It was like a one-off thing to say, okay, look, we want something that people, every time they use it, other people will ask them about, and they have now an opportunity to say, oh, is this thing I'm trying, blah, blah, blah. It breaks a lot, but it seems to be cool. And then it turns out people really liked it, you really liked it, and we just stick to it. So yeah, that's a real story. But journalists don't like that one that much. So Tom tells the other one, it's more like, oh, it was this crazy thing just happened. And
Yeah, and it was Hugo's shoes were hot coral.
exactly.
And you had a deadline and said, I'm going to make it.
I'll do that.
Whatever.
I guess I'll do that. Yeah.
Okay, next question.
There's no more questions, I think. I just clicked.
Is that it? Okay, great. We have 10 more minutes, so we will take questions from the audience. There are 2 roving mics.
Oh, how cool. Go back to...
Me first? Okay. You talked a little bit about values you expect from the people you hire. What are they?
This is like an exam question that I'm definitely going to get wrong, so I'll talk about in the abstract about them unless you've memorized all.
I do, but no, go on.
Why don't you start then?
Okay. So we have a list. It's interesting. Like we've defined them a few months ago, but I think about it like we've written them down. Like the values were already there. As a company, we were already doing it, but now we have nice wording that hopefully people can remember. Okay, so one of them is default to transparency. So, and I think with you is the same. Like every time we create a piece of information, it is transparent by default, unless we have a very good reason to not make it transparent. And that works very well. It simplifies so many things. Like communication, it's easier, everything is available. So
I think that is very different. It's very natural for us, but especially senior people who come in from big organizations. That's the one thing that they really remarked. Like, oh, you said you were transparent, but oh my gosh, I didn't realize how transparent you actually were in practice, and then what knock-on effects that has, good and bad. So I think that is, as a company, you can write stuff on the wall, but unless it's really lived, I don't think it's particularly useful.
There you go. Another one is to be hard on problems and not on people. This is something I practice a lot. So we do design critique, and it's one of the things that I'm really hardcore in how I think about design, and I'm tough about design, but not about the designers that have worked on it. So that applies all across the company. So we really want to do something better, but we want it with people that are happy and empowered to be working on those problems, if that makes sense. Another one, I'm gonna fuck it up now. Another one is to start small, but think big, and to own problems. So it's maybe similar to what we were saying before. Like we are very iterative on the stuff that Jordan and Fu were talking before. So start with small things, but with a goal that is really, really important and that actually solves the thing, and to enable people to take ownership of the pieces of work. So nothing is kind of responsibility of other people. If you are working on it, it is your responsibility to deliver something that's of very good quality and works. So that's another one. We have one that maybe is a bit more aspirational, that is to make everybody feel that they belong. I think that has a lot to do with inclusivity and diversity. So it's something that it's close to our hearts, but we know we have to do way, way better. So that's in there as well. Am I missing one? Make a difference. Isn't it part of the start small? No? Make a difference. Okay. To me, it's kind of the same. All right. Make a difference. Okay. So that's another one. So well, all right. Is there another one?
We were debating adding move fast in control, but I don't think that's been formally added yet. The sort of the racing car analogy, a little nod to our risk management culture. I think that's all of them.
There you go. So yeah, those are the values. Really, the important thing is maybe what Tom was saying before. Like as we grow, those things we need to document them better, because we need to be able to communicate and offices in different places in the world, like all those things. More questions?
Yeah, I was wondering about your decision to move into the States, particularly, seems like a kind of strange time, particularly if you're putting kind of 5% of your effort into that. Was that based on was that because of the investors? Quite often companies do that because investors don't take them
No.
seriously enough until they're in the States, or what was the decision to move now and to move kind of slowly with only 5% of your effort?
Start small, think big. I mean, that's why. There's a really, really long. There are two things: long lead times, basically. We've been working with the regulators in the US for some time now, and that's ongoing. And then also making sure we have product market fit before we're ready to scale. So it's an absolute reflection of that value that I think there's a huge, huge opportunity in the US. 300 million people and their banks more or less suck in the same way that the UK banks do. But we tend not to do big bang launches because they go bang in a bad way. And so we want to start with exactly the same way we started in the UK, which is in-person card handouts, hearing from people like you, but with a different accent probably, and talking about their bank and getting a card out into their hands so that we can see if it works or not, and figuring out the areas it works really well versus the areas it doesn't work really well, and then iterate to improve it. And so I think you can do that really, really effectively with a team of 10 or 15 people. It's exactly the way we started here. I think if we were just presumed the product and service we had in the UK was going to work in the US and transplanted it without adapting it, and then you just throw ad budget at it, I think it's just super risky. So it's our way of starting small.
Any other questions?
So you were talking a lot, like today, other people about integration with the partners and other providers. And do you like think about like people feeling like under surveillance or just like stalked during the like you're getting offers for because you bought this, then you get the offer for this, and like not end up like Google suggesting you some things and you feel it's like not real for you. You don't want it. Just
I have some thoughts about that. Probably yours are deeper. The way I think about this, the concern is spot on. Like people's privacy matters a lot. I think the thing is to give people the choice in all this stuff. Like to say, hey, are you all right with us sharing these 3 particular things so you get these other things? Do you want it or not? Like to make it very, very clear. I think what many tech companies have not done very well is to not be clear at all about that and basically hide it as, for this to run, you need to do that. We won't tell you about, even though you will read it on the news. I think that's the mistake on its own. To try to lock down privacy, I think it's another process, it's another way of doing it, it's all right, but it doesn't necessarily allow for many of the things that you can, if you are in control of your own data and you share it the way you want. Does that make sense? That's how I think about it. I don't know how you.
I agree. I think it's about user choice. I think just saying we're not going to do any of them because some proportion of people won't like it is, I think, really bad for most people. But the other extreme, which is we'll share all of your data with loads of people without asking you, I think gets you in a huge amount of trouble, as we've seen with some of the big tech companies. So giving people visibility and control, I think the evidence we've seen so far is that vast majority of people are very, very happy to share a small amount of data in return for saving 300 quid on their gas and electricity, for example. The kind of convenience and ease of use is worth that trade-off, but it has to be an explicit choice from the customer, not a sort of buried the kind of 10 menus deep.
I was wondering what's your approach to right here in the back.
It's so difficult to track.
And what's your approach to lending, particularly to risk and credit assessment? I think in your annual report you say you lent out £90 million in overdraft in 2019. You're also planning to lose 3 million of that. So I think that's a very quick way how to lose a lot of money. So I'm just wondering what's your approach to, is that like an experiment you're running, or what's your approach to lending?
Right now, our approach, what is our approach to lending? I think we've been slow, basically. We have something like 2.3 million customers now, about £600 million of deposits. And we know those customers are borrowing about £7.5 billion of unsecured borrowing, that's excluding mortgages and student debt. That's just unsecured, things like credit cards, lines of credit overdrafts, term loans. So 2.3 million customers are borrowing £7.5 billion. We are currently servicing about £36 million of that £7.5 billion of borrowing. And we know people aren't often paying the best rates, and that the service they're getting isn't always the best either. And so we think there's a huge opportunity to give our customers a product that they are already using elsewhere and get them really competitive rates and provide them a much, much, much better experience in terms of transparency, flexibility, ease of use, like no penalty fares, whilst also making Monzo sustainable. And honestly, we've just not been very good at scaling that lending book. Our default rates right now are running between about 2 and 3.5%, which is absolutely fine, right? When you lend money out, you take some credit risk and you expect some proportion, like to lose some proportion, and that's okay. If you're not losing any money, you're probably not lending to enough people. And so it's something we need to scale out. I think we can, over the next few years, with the access to the data we have, what you're spending, where you're spending it, your salary, those kind of things, we can build credit models that are industry leading. Right now, we're not. We're using credit reference data, basically there are 3 big credit reference agencies, Experian and a couple of others, and we basically get your credit file and make an assessment on that. It's pretty dumb. If you're new to the country, you don't appear. If you move around a lot, you don't appear. If you've never borrowed before, very, very thin files, and we can't lend to any of you based on that. So I think we can do a lot better for customers and also help make Monzo sustainable. So that's going to be our approach. And you'll probably see the lending book scale quite nicely, I hope, over the next 6 or 9 months. So 35 million pounds today. We're aiming to sort of 150, 200 million pound loan book in the next 6 or 9 months or so. We have time for one last question, I think.
The box. That guy has been waiting for a long time.
Thank you. So this is a two-parter. It's about your marketplace statement you made. First of all, why do you think you've been slow in terms of building that out? And secondly, I know in America there's a company called SoFi who are like pioneering this subscription-based financial services model. So what are your thoughts on that, and would you ever adopt that?
I really don't have enough context.
Marketplace, why I've been slow? Why have we been slow? To start with, the current account wasn't ready last year. There were just a bunch of missing functionality. And I think we fixed a lot of that in 2018. Even now, I think the main, we need to drive deeper adoption engagement of the Monzo product. And that's encouraging more people to put their salaries in. So please put your salaries in and set their direct debits up out of Monzo. Because that then gives you the data, which makes it really easy for you to say, hey, British Gas just hiked your prices up from X to Y. You will absolutely get a better deal if you switch to Octopus or Bulb or whoever. We don't have that direct debit data for most of the customers now. And so I think it makes sense for us to drive engagement of salaries and direct debits, and in parallel be working on the kind of partnerships like mortgage switching and energy switching, so that when we do have that really deep engagement and visibility of the data, then we're able to offer this kind of super convenient marketplace. But we're not there right now. So please, please, please put your salary in. Second question, basically subscription-based business models. Yeah, I mean, that's something we're looking at with Monzo Plus for sure. So Monzo Plus will have a monthly subscription with then optional bolt-ons. If you're someone who travels a lot, you can, in future, even today, you'll get travel insurance, but extras that will make traveling better, whether it's lounge access or whatever. Or if you are a renter, getting rental like content insurance, for example. So kind of bolt-ons that suit your lifestyle for a monthly subscription absolutely is one way we're exploring of monetizing. Some great questions, and thank you again. I think we're all out of time. I'm going to run to the next building for a keynote in approximately 20 or 30 minutes, I think. So it's absolutely wonderful seeing you all here. Thank you very much for giving up your sunny Saturday to come and listen to us talk about banking. And thank you again for all of your support in the crowdfunding. It means an absolute huge deal to all of us. So thank you very much, and have a great day.
Simon's slides. Awesome. Yeah, do you want to give people a couple more minutes? Or did Meri even hear you? Okay, so sorry, I'm going to like finishing up. Never give people let me out early. Yeah. We need to.
Are you actually?
Simon's slides are on.
Simon's slides are okay.
I just need to make them bigger.
Someone needs to film.
Hello. If everyone could just make their way back to their seats, we're going to get started on our second to last talk, penultimate talk of the evening. Just make your way back. And if we could just clear a little space to the left-hand side. Amazing, right? This next talk is an absolute banger of a talk. And an absolute banger of a talk needs an absolute banger of an introduction. So without further ado, here's Simon.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, my name's Simon. I'm Simon VC on Twitter. If I fall off this unicycle, you have my permission to tweet the video. I am an engineer here at Monzo, and I have the pleasure of your company for the next 20 minutes. This talk, and then you have Meri, our CTO, who will have a much more sensible talk, I think. I am going to talk to you for 20 minutes in 4 parts. The first part is a 55-second YouTube video that I haven't tested whether or not it actually is going to work or not. And then I'm going to tell you about what I do at Monzo. It's called scouting. And then I'm going to spend about 10 minutes telling you about some of the things that I have completely failed at, which is what scouting is. And then I'm going to get your ideas, and I'm going to tell you why I think they're terrible. Does that sound good? Cool. Okay. So let's. Okay. Firstly, I have a question for you. Who follows me on Twitter? Okay, so the rest of you have a homework job. I'm Simon VC. So can I have the next slide, please? I'm not good with technology. Amazing. Okay, how do I make the video play? Oh, what?
Point and play.
Oh, okay. Let's wait, let's know. Do I do this? Is this my job?
Someone help him? Yeah.
I'm going to do the sound. I've watched this video so many times.
Simon there? Simon knows. You just
How do I do
press
it? How do I do it?
sit
Is it?
down
Oh, it's
and
this.
use it as a cursor.
Okay, then what?
Keep it out, right, and then just drag it.
What?
Yeah, there we go.
What?
Yeah. Technology.
This is insane. Technology's gone too far.
Press a button to click. Oh no. No, the same button. Yeah, that's the one.
What button?
The top.
This is the fairy Rotodyne. I don't know how to do the video. Basically, this is the fairy Rotodyne. This is from 1957. It's about 9 years before man walked on the moon. We had this giant helicopter thing. This man's from Bahrain. and he's impressed by the Fairy Rotodyne, and you should be impressed by the Fairy Rotodyne as well. It flies at 200 knots, about 240 miles an hour. It can take off and land anywhere. It doesn't need a runway. It can hold 65 people, and everything about it sounds absolutely fantastic. And like, why is this not a thing? Like, we were able to do this before we put men on the moon, long time before I was born. They only ever built one of them, and it took them 6 years, and then they scrapped it. And it makes me really sad because it's such a beautiful machine. It had rocket-tipped rotor blades. Like, how freaking cool is that? And most people don't even know. This is obviously from the late 50s, so this is very sexist. They put 65 nurses in it to prove that it would work. So that's the Fairy Rotodyne. So why am I showing you a video about my favorite extinct flying vehicle? It's because, nope, no. Oh, God. See, like, we could do that before we put men in the moon, but we can't make slides advance with a single click. Oh, come on. Seriously. Okay, we're good. Okay, now the slides are automatically advancing. No, I don't know what's going on. Are we good? Okay, this is hilarious. Okay, so who's seen this matrix before? This like high impact, high effort, low impact, low effort, right? So I hate this slide, and it comes up a lot in management consultants, and they're like, you should only work on, like, you should work firstly on the things that are high impact and low effort, and then you should work on the things that are high impact and high effort. And people see this and they go like, I mean, imagine you've decided to build the Fairy Rotodyne, right? Like, I mean, it seems like it's going to be a pretty hard thing to do, so it's probably going to be high effort, but you also think it's going to be hugely impactful. Like, we won't need runways anymore. We can just land these things like, they actually landed outside the European Parliament in Brussels. And they landed it on a pier at Battersea, next to Battersea Power Station. So, I mean, that sounds like it's going to be hugely impactful. But the thing that it ignores, the thing that this matrix ignores, and the problem, which is a sort of sociological problem, is that it ignores risk. It ignores, like, what is the chance of this project failing? Like, what is the chance of us getting this wrong? Like, what is the chance that we've taken this concept, this brilliant idea that we've had, and we put it in the wrong box? And for the engineers that built the Fairy Rotodyne and spent 6 years of their lives solving super technical problems, they thought the Fairy Rotodyne was going to be up here. They thought it was going to be a major project with huge effort, but it was actually down here. It was a major project, enormous amounts of effort, and it was completely pointless because they only built one and they sold none, and basically they scrapped it for its aluminium. They didn't even put it in an aerospace museum in Duxford, which makes me really sad. So I don't like this graph. So when we're at Monzo, we want to try as many experiments as possible. We want to try as many different things as possible. And before we commit, before we invest a whole bunch of time in something and, waste our precious time and our precious venture capital rocket fuel, we have to work out where projects really sit. Are they really going to be high impact? And are they really going to be low effort? Or are they going to be impossible? So we want to remove as many of these risks as possible. We want to work out if we're actually correctly assessing the impact and the risk of something. And then we also want to get to a point where, like, if we've been working on something and it turns out we were wrong, and we want to put a whole bunch of time into it, but the results are just bad, we want to avoid continuing working on things that aren't going to work. We want to keep the costs of these experiments as low as possible so we can do it as quickly as possible. But the thing I really want to talk about, the thing that's really close to my heart, is how do you build an organization where people feel like it's okay to do things that are destined to fail? Because you want to fail as many times as possible. You want to fail like 90 times to get 10 winners. Because if you do, you get these, you sort of like minority game theory says that you've done something that nobody else has done. If you only work on things that everybody thinks are going to succeed and you succeed, then everyone's done the same thing and you haven't built anything unique. So we need to build an organization where people feel comfortable failing often. Who's heard of the idea of 100 rejections a year? It's a really popular blog post. It's advice they give to writers and to writers and to public speakers, especially when they start out, that you should apply to 100 things a year. You should try and aim to get rejected from 100 things a year, because the process is just, like it is structured in such a way that if you do that, then you will get 1 or 2 big wins. So this is what the job of a scout at Monzo does. Who knows Team Fortress 2? I love Team Fortress 2, so that's the scout from TF2. The idea of a scout is to lower the cost of failure instead of the chance of failure, right? So prove ideas are bad as quickly as possible. So other banks have the concept of like an innovation engineer, which is somebody who takes like an idea that might come from senior management or from outside the organization, and then really throws themselves at that problem and just tries to make it work, and they try and try and try, and they try to make it work. Whereas what I do and what the other scouts at Monzo do is we try to prove that your idea is terrible as quickly as possible so we can move on to other ideas. And we try to do as many of those ideas as possible. And it turns out if you just invert that model, and if you go right out there and say, my job is to prove that this idea is bad as quickly as possible, then people will actually respect that when you say, no, like I was working on this thing that didn't work out. I worked on 10 things that didn't work out this month, Like next month, I'm going to try and work on 15 things, and I hope they all turn out to be terrible ideas. So that's the idea of a scout, is to really embrace bad ideas and prove that they're bad as quickly as possible, because every now and again you'll fail, and then somebody will basically come along and take that idea and turn it into something. And the other thing that a scout needs to be aware of is that some things you can't just prove an idea is bad quickly, because quite often the thing that makes an idea bad is the fact that you have to work with an organization. Like it might be working out whether a partner is a good partner or not. And that can take, months. You might have to actually be persistent to try and prove an idea is bad. But you're going into that process with the assumption that you're trying to, as quickly as possible, prove that they're a bad partner. But it means that you might have to spend a bunch of time on stuff, which means scouts generally work on multiple parallel threads at once. My colleague and friend Anthony, who's sitting at the back row, he works for YLD, and I stole this slide completely shamelessly from a blog post that I think he's posted, but I'm not sure. If he hasn't, you should look him up on Twitter and read it. It's a really good explanation of this idea. And it's this idea that if you work on things that everybody agrees with, these consensus ideas, and you succeed, then everybody's like, of course, that was always going to work. That was always a good idea. But if you work on things that everybody thinks were a good idea, they're consensus ideas, and you fail, then everyone's like, oh, don't worry about it. Like, no one could have possibly foreseen that was a really bad idea. And if you work on ideas that are non-consensus ideas, if you work on ideas that people think, is that really a good idea? Should we do that? And you fail, then everyone thinks you're a fool. And if you work on ideas that are non-consensus ideas and you succeed, everyone goes, wow, we all thought that was a terrible idea, but you actually pulled it off. And this is a real anti-pattern that I want to avoid. I don't want to be perceived as either a fool or a hero. I want to take the process of scouting and make it a normal part of trying to work out what we build so we can reduce the risk and work on the right things as often as possible. This is another slide I stole from Anthony. It's the idea that in an organization, if you structure this sort of process, you'll have people like me who are pioneers who go out and try and, actually it says determined to prove value. I actually would rather say determined to prove there is no value in an idea. But yeah, same basic idea. You have these people who are pioneers, and then settlers are the people who come behind them and steal the good ones and build them. And I'm like really fortunate to work with Kieran McHugh, if he's still here somewhere, up the back there. Kieran basically has indulged many of my stupidest ideas, including if this, then that. And so every time we have Monzo time, I basically try and find out where he is and steal him and use him to build things. And then eventually I'll have town planners, people who take these ideas and scale them across the organization and turn them into business lines. When talking about success and failures, like when I was writing this talk, it's actually really hard because when you have proven an idea is bad, you can't always talk about why. Because quite often the answer is, because that company we were working with is not a good company to work with, or they're not capitalized, or the project that you had is literally illegal, which has happened a few times. So, so I can only really talk about the ones where we either succeeded in proving it was a bad idea, but that don't involve working with other companies. So one of the first things that I did was roundups, CoinJar. Who remembers the original version of CoinJar when you actually had to rename a pot to CoinJar? Hugo, is he still here? He hated that idea so much. So I built CoinJar basically without asking anyone's permission or without having any front-end developers to help me. And the only thing I could do, the only way I could make a pot into a CoinJar was by hacking it so that it used the name of the pot. But that meant it was able to really quickly test it without having to spend any time trying to find front-end developers. And IFTTT started as the same type of thing. It started as a Monzo time project and something I really wanted to do, but I was like, this is probably not going to work. It's probably illegal. Let's just try and prove that it's a bad idea. And we actually launched IFTTT at about the same time that GDPR came out. And like when we were going through going as quickly as possible, let's just get this idea out of our head and just prove that it's a bad idea. I remember going to our legal team and saying we wanted to launch this service that will take customer data and send it to an American company. And they were like, right. And what's the American company going to do with it? And I was like, it's going to send it on to all other companies as well. And they were like, right, okay. But we failed at proving it was a bad idea, and it turns out it's an okay idea, so it's live. Another idea that I pitched and was able to actually prove was a bad idea was the idea of Monzo coin. So it was connecting the Monzo ledger to the Ethereum blockchain so that you could basically take Great British pounds currency and sort of convert it into. Does anyone here know what Ethereum is? Or am I just like, okay, so Ethereum is a cryptocurrency that has this concept of a smart contract, and you can create tokens. And most of those tokens are worthless. Some of them are, technologically, it's a very interesting project and it might change the world, but it hasn't done yet. But we decided to try and work out how quickly we could prove that it was a terrible idea. So we built it and we connected our staging environment to the Ethereum blockchain. And it turns out the reason why this is a terrible idea is because there's a European Banking Association regulation that says that banks aren't allowed to create new non-nominative bearer tokens, which is what this would be. And I would never have found that out if I hadn't built it and showed it to a whole bunch of people and had them explain to me why it was completely illegal. But the fun thing is I now have a 6 or 7 page PDF document that's 2 years old that completely explains what Facebook's new Libra cryptocurrency is. We were just 2 years too early and regulated. So that's some of the things that I can talk about. So there's some things that I am scouting now that I can talk about. One of the things that I'm working on is, who's ever attached a receipt using the Monzo app to that? So it's not a super popular feature, but it's been there since the beginning. You can actually take any transaction and attach a picture of a receipt. And we don't do anything with those pictures of the receipts. We never have. Using IFTTT will let you upload it automatically to Expensify, for example, but we don't do anything with it. We don't OCR it or anything else. And some of my colleagues, especially Matt Heath, who's a very well-known public speaker, he uses that feature primarily to store pictures of his brunch when he goes to brunch places. I don't know what he was thinking. I think that's the real reason the feature exists. But one of the things that I'm scouting at the moment is, could we partner with an external company to do optical character recognition on those receipts and extract semantic data? And then what would you do with that data? Like we could use it to, for example, calculate the VAT from every receipt that you upload. And then we could give you a pot, like a Monzo pot, that automatically stores the correct amount of VAT if you're a small business. So you have the exact amount of VAT you have to pay to the government at all times stored in a pot, which would be pretty cool. So I'm trying to work out if that's going to work. I'm doing some scouting to work out whether or not we could allow you to, as a business customer, take payments using nothing but your mobile phone. Imagine taking your mobile phone out and holding, like if you run a small business, you could take like somebody's card and actually do a contactless payment just by holding their card up to the back of your phone and trying to work out whether or not that is possible now or will ever be possible in the future. Another thing that I've been scouting for a while is the ability to, it's like, what would it look like if we were able to connect merchants back to their customers in like a really nice way? So in this example on the right-hand side here, you can see an EasyJet transaction that looks like a normal Monzo transaction, except EasyJet have also sent us information about the check-in and your booking number. as well as a button that lets you manage your booking directly, and another button that lets you buy travel insurance from either Monzo or from EasyJet. And this is a really interesting idea that we're pursuing. And there are, like, the interesting thing about this, and one of the things that I've worked out from scouting, is that a lot of these like services that might connect your bank account to other merchants will require you to opt in and share your data outside of Monzo. And I don't think that's the future. I think everybody's super conscious and aware of their privacy and the fact that their data is being spread very widely. And we don't want to like encourage that. So what I'm trying to work out, what I'm trying to scout at the moment is, could we build a system that inverts that? So that instead of your data ever being shared outside Monzo, we provide an API for merchants to prove that they are the merchant side of the transaction. And then we take what they send us and we just show it to you. So customer data never leaves Monzo, but you still get these beautiful experiences that are contextual and super nice. So we'll see if that one ever works out. I hope it does. The receipts one I already talked about. Another one that I'm really excited about is, this isn't a real thing, by the way. If anyone's a journalist here, this doesn't exist. You haven't seen this. It's not a real thing. But in Asia, I was in the Philippines recently, and a lot of people use QR codes and WeChat and Alipay to pay for things, right? And when you go to pay for something, you just pull out your phone and you scan the QR code, and then it basically brings up the merchant, and that's how you pay for things. And I've been trying to work out why no business plan that's ever required QR codes has ever worked in the UK. And what would it look like if we did a very similar thing to WeChat and Alipay, but instead of using QR codes, we'd use Bluetooth Low Energy. So you pull your phone out and it basically just pops up and shows the merchants that are nearby and the bill of things that you can buy from them. And it's nice and easy to pay for things. Does anybody here go to Broadway Market? Yeah, so Broadway, yeah, every Monzo person puts their hand up. Broadway Market's great, but a lot of merchants don't take cash, and there's one ATM, and there's like a 150-meter long queue, and it makes me sick, the fact that people could just pay directly, like Monzo peer-to-peer, or Monzo peer-to-business. So I want to fix that just so I don't have to go to the ATM ever again. So now, I have 5 more minutes before you have Meri. So I want you to tell me your ideas and try and keep it like 15 seconds, 1 or 2 sentences, and I will try and tell you how I would go about scouting that. And if I can't think of a reason why that's a terrible idea straight off the bat, then I will go and scout it for you. So put your hands up if you have a question, if you have an idea. You, sir. Yeah, so that's a great idea. So the idea is, so you land on a Greek island and you want to pull up your Monzo and see where people have spent. So we've actually started building that. We've had a channel going for about 2 years now called Maps and Stars at Monzo. And I told you about Matt Heath, how he uses the photo upload thing mostly to take pictures of brunch. So the idea was we would actually let you star brunch places that you like. And then we would, our retirement plan would just be to produce a guidebook of places so we'd never have to find a brunch place again. But if you looked on our blog, I think just yesterday or the day before, our data science team has actually done exactly that. They've basically published a digital map using some crazy smart algorithm that ranks places by how cool they are or something, I don't know. But there is actually a map there now. There is actually in the Android app now, not a lot of people have noticed it, but if you go into the Android app, you can actually click on the map on the background. It's a bit of an Easter egg, it's a bit hidden, and it will actually show you your places. And I think that's eventually going to get extended to also include places that other Monzo customers like, but like inversely penalized if it's a popular place. So it'll find you those local gems. So yeah, it's going to happen. Great idea. I can't prove that one's bad. Any more? I got time for like 2 more ideas and we're done. You, sir.
Yes, sir.
A financial health score. We have a financial health squad. So I guess a financial health score is a bit like, if I'm guessing, it's something like your credit score. Damn, I really like it. Can we build that?
Repeat that for the stream, Simon.
Oh, sorry, a financial health score, something that takes into to account more of your financial well-beingness than just your credit score. Yeah, that's a great idea. We should do that because, I mean, sorry, I'm completely ruining the whole principle of my talk. It sounds like a great idea, and I will try and scout that one for you and let you know. Send me a tweet afterwards, and I'll give you a full credit for the idea if we end up building it. Time for one more, and then we're done. Yes, sir.
Nominative, how to integrate something into Monzo that was thought to be non-nominative bearer token, but coming from a Libra consortium.
Okay, so should we connect to Facebook's Libra? So this actually came up. At our revenue incubator away day on Thursday or Friday. I remember Friday, I think. It's an interesting question. I will actually be scouting that for sure. I'm not saying that we're going to do it. I'm saying that there's a 99% chance that we're not going to do it. I have some thoughts about why it's an interesting idea. It's because they've created a currency which isn't native anywhere. So everyone will have to pay FX to buy the currency and then FX at the edges. And nobody loves money transmission companies, especially the big ones. I think there should be something better in the world. But as a bank, we take anti-money laundering and know your customer requirements really, really seriously. And when you've spent any time working inside Monzo and seen our amazing financial crime team, you realize how important it is to have money that's correctly regulated, because without that, society ends up with a real human trafficking and modern slavery problem, terrorist financing and things like that. So I think those of us who work at Monzo have become a lot more aware of why those things are very, very important. So it'll be interesting to see how companies that connect to Libra solve that. But yeah, I think it's an interesting problem. I would definitely try. So that's it. That's all the time I have time for. Thank you very much. And I'll hand over to Meri.
Not ride the unicycle. The clicker. You all had fun today so far? Poison chalice, after lunch is always the tough slot, but end of the day when everybody's like, there's a beer right there, is a really tough slot. In the world, yes. I'm not promising you anything. Awesome. So hi, I'm Meri Williams. I'm the CTO of this wonderful place. I am going to talk today about how we think about scaling our teams and scaling our culture as we do so. Thank you all for being here. It's good to have you. So I've worked at lots of different sizes of organization. I actually spent the first 10 years of my career in a company that was $80 billion revenue, 150,000 employees. So it's quite weird to then, a very different experience to be in much smaller startup since then. But the overwhelming thing I've learned over the last 5-10 years of scaling companies is there are some very definite inflection points, and that you hit these new numbers that are somehow they're not magical in any way, but new problems exist at these different points, and the things that you thought you'd never worry about suddenly become the things you really, really need to worry about. And so the first reflection I have on scaling is this thing about knowing which inflection point you're approaching is really important to focus on the right problems. And what I mean by that is when you have 10 people in the room, everybody knows everything for free, right? You don't have to spend a lot of time aligning everybody in the company on the mission because you all sit next to each other and you all know what you're trying to do, right? Over 10 people, some communication things start to happen. Over 50 people start going what's my career path here? It's a whole different set of kind of concerns become very apparent. At 100, people don't know everybody in the company anymore. And there's this thing called Dunbar number, which I'm not sure if you've all heard of, which is that the average human can only maintain connections with 150 other people, which is why like the traditional village size, as we, in kind of slightly longer ago history, tended to be around that. And we actually struggle as people to maintain meaningful relationships with more than that number of people. And you probably don't want all the meaningful relationships you're maintaining to only be with people at work, right? Like, however, my colleagues are amazing, but I probably don't want to only have those with folks here. And so that's why you see both different things mattering at different points, but also most very successful organizations, when you look at how they're actually structured, they've got mostly highly functional groups of 100 to 150 people doing most things. They're not 140,000 people, they're a huge collection of 100 to 150 person groups. And one of the things that's really fascinating about being here is, I think so I joined last August, and in June, when we end of June, when we announced that I was going to be joining, there were 50 engineers in the technology team, and by the 4th of September, there were 100. And that was that's an unusually rapid kind of transition from one inflection point to another. We're now 1,000 people in the company, which has happened, again, very rapidly. And so where other organizations might have had months or even years at these different points to get used to what's changing, we've sort of rocketed through some of those transition points very fast. You may have all seen this, it's a very funny diagram from a New York Times article about 6 years ago now, about how the different major tech companies, what their org structures are really like. I particularly love the Microsoft one. Have a number of friends who've described how those loaded guns feel as well. And I suppose one thing we've spent a lot of time thinking about at Monzo is what would we want our parody diagram to look like? It's probably not particularly like any of those, right? We're quite aware of some of the challenges some of those organizations have. But you can get very focused on the wrong things if you look too far at the horizon. There's lots of startups and scale-ups that talk far too much about what Google do and not what Google did when they were the same size or the same stage of the journey that they're at right now. And so we're trying to keep focused on the actual next challenge rather than the 10 or 15 years in the future or the 100,000 employees size challenge. Because it can be really strangely comforting to focus on the far too far future. It feels less urgent, it feels less terrifying. And so we actually do quite a lot here to try and go, is this really the next immediate thing that we should focus on? And so that thing of focusing on the right problems at the right time and remembering this inflection points thing is one of the guiding principles for how we think about scaling. The second, I suppose, scaling lesson I had, and I've scaled a number of different teams. I was at the Government Digital Service when we went from 30 to 300 people in 9 months, which was a thing. It was tough. Somebody had promised the Prime Minister a date, which wasn't immensely agile, but it was what happened. And I've been in that kind of double, triple, or quadruple the team in a relatively short period of time situation a number of times. And though I'm a Python programmer by background, and so don't repeat yourself is one of our sort of very closely held aphorisms in that community. And it's a great programming principle, like reuse, modularize, make sure that you can save time, I suppose. It doesn't work for humans at all. It's great in code, terrible for humans. And this thing of needing to remember that we need to repeat important things constantly and consistently. There's a stat about people needing to hear something at least 7 times before it really sinks in, is increasingly important. And sometimes that's about helping people realize that they kind of don't know what they don't know. Sometimes it's about making sure that the same information is available to everybody in the company. One thing I really have enjoyed about joining here is all the talk about transparency is actually very real and very lived. And it's a very different kind of senior management team or executive team when everybody genuinely believes that everyone in the company can make a brilliant decision and that if a bad decision is made, the root cause is much more likely that we failed to share the right context or give people the ability to make the right choice, rather than that somebody's going to kind of do something dumb. It's very refreshing, to be honest. And part of the reason I feel really strongly about this communication point is I've been in organizations where like there wasn't enough information, and very genuinely like the main thing that underinformed engineers produce more of than code is conspiracy theories. People think if they don't communicate, then like people just won't know. If you don't communicate, people will make amazing shit up. Like some of it's really fascinating to find out what people think is happening if they're not told enough. But again, it's one reason why I was very pleased that at the point I joined Monzo, it was already a very well-established thing that we shared a lot internally, and that people really had the right to know, and that we were transparent about lots of things. And so being clear, being consistent, and kind of getting to the point of saying things so many times you're really worried that you're boring everyone now, but for some people that'll still be the first time that it sinks in. It's quite important. I think it's very like visibly tough for people who were at Monzo when it was a really tiny organization or when it was relatively small, to remember that like the making sure everybody knows what's going on takes effort now when it's 1,000 people, where it maybe didn't when it was 10 or 15 or how many were when you were first here, Simon? 11, yeah. I imagine there weren't a lot of like weekly briefings needed when there were 11 people at the company, right? And the other thing I think we're getting increasingly good at, especially in engineering and product and design and in data, is remembering that we're not just communicating in the present. Our future selves and our future colleagues need to know why we did what we did, not just what we did. And so in engineering, we talk about architectural decision records. In the company generally, we have a approach of writing proposals for most things, and that being shared within the company very openly, and people being able to comment and contribute. But it means when you go back and you're like, this is weird. Is this weird because I don't understand how it works? Is this weird because at the time it totally made sense, but a whole bunch of stuff has changed? Or is it just weird and it can be fixed? And being able to go back and go, is this the way it is for a good reason or not, is super valuable. One of the questions I was asked when I was being interviewed to join by Oliver, who's our chief architect, was I'd been in a lot of what I would refer to as like legacy rescue situations. I worked on code so legacy it's vintage, right? Like seriously. I've worked in places where like you go in and keeping the mainframe running is still the thing that you have to care about in a year that starts with 2.0, which is fun. But the biggest problem in those situations, so Oliver was like, how do we prevent anything that we're creating now becoming legacy? And almost all of that is about capturing context. It's not just writing documentation of what this thing does, it's writing documentation of why this thing does it this way. Because then when you want to change it in future, you can revisit it and be like, things have changed. It's safe to change this. When I was asked to talk about this topic, the main meat of what I've got to share today is probably our approach to, well, it's my philosophy, but reflected as our approach to how we think about scaling. Really, scaling the company and the teams is about creating the conditions for success. It's not telling people what to do. It's not forcing people to do things. It's literally like creating an environment in which people. I don't know whether. Oh, there we go. We just cut out. And I think we all know we hate bad bosses, right? Like the pointy head boss in Dilbert is an icon, negative icon for a reason. We describe bad bosses as clueless, as empty suits, as pointless. We're all familiar with the seagull style of management: fly in, shout at everybody, shit on everything, fly away again. I do some talks, and the audience like recoils at that, and I'm like, oh, who hurt you? It's good. It's kind of good when people laugh. They're like through the pain of it, having experienced it. And I remember being an engineer and moving into a manager role for the first time, having not necessarily had brilliant being managed experiences, and deciding I just refused to be bad at something, and so I was going to learn enough to do well at this. This is the best cat gif on the internet, I can confirm after extensive research. You're welcome. And Katerina Fake's a leader in technology who I look up to a lot, and I like this characterization she gives of, there's 3 kinds of managers: the bullshit umbrella protects their team, the bullshit funnel decides the person they least like in the team will endure the concentration of all of it. Again, if you've been that person, I'm very sorry for what you have endured. And then the bullshit fan kind of just spreads it all around indiscriminately, right? This guy called Nick Means, who's a engineering director over at GitHub, who's got a much better way of a much better term for this now, actually, which is, if you try to be a bullshit umbrella, you risk people not knowing what's going on. And he says it's better to be a heat shield, which I really like, because a heat shield, you still know that there's heat over there. You're still aware of what's happening, but you feel, you've got a bit of protection from it. You're able to keep going. I think it's a really good characterization. And so when I became a manager, and where a lot of my kind of thinking around this came from was, I have a favorite management book, and you can now decide that I'm far too nerdy for you to, come up and speak to me afterwards, and that's okay. But it's this book called First Break All the Rules, which I like because it's very data-based. Gallup did a huge study, hundreds of thousands of people interviewed, trying to figure out what made teams high-performing. Not what made them happy, but what made them high-performing. And they looked at, why is this restaurant so much better than the others in the chain? Why is this factory so much more successful, got a much better safety record? Why is this division outperforming all the others? And they found that these sort of 12 questions predicted how high-performing a team would be, whether people could answer these positively or not. I know my immediate reaction to being given 12 things on a wall of text is like, thanks, now I'm drowning. I'm never going to be able to remember that. You don't have to remember that, don't worry. So if we zoom out, who's read Pink, Daniel Pink's Drive? A couple of you? Okay. There's a 12-minute long sketch note video, which will save you the need to read the entire book if you would like to. But he did a review of basically the modern research in psychology about what motivates people, what makes people not just get up, not grumble too much when they go to work on a Monday morning, but actually excited to get to work, to do what they're doing. And found that it was this combination of purpose and autonomy and mastery. So, do I believe in why? Is this mission meaningful to me? Do I get a say in what? Do I feel like I've got autonomy? And then, am I proud of how? Do I feel like I'm getting better at the thing that I do? Am I proud of the quality of the work that I do? And then take away any negative factors. If you've got the worst commute in the world, or the purpose, autonomy, and mastery isn't going to make up for it indefinitely. And that kind of captures many of these 12 questions that predict high performance, right? So does the mission or the purpose of my company make me feel like my work is important? Do I know what's expected of me, and do my opinions seem to count? And I find it really fascinating how I remember reading this book and being like, oh, this is why people don't understand why creative technologists quit. Because a huge amount of this is about mastery, about feeling like you're good at the thing that you do and you're getting better at the thing that you do. And I look back at how many designers and engineers and data scientists and product people I've seen just get frustrated and leave, not from Monzo, to be really clear, in the past. And I look down that list of mastery and I'm like, oh yeah, I can see where we were going wrong now. This book's from the late 90s, and some of the phrasing here betrays that. So I think we wouldn't just ask about materials and equipment anymore. We'd ask about people and time and access. Do I have the opportunity to do what I do best every day? Does someone at work care about my development? Are my co-workers committed to doing quality work? And in the last 6 months, have I talked to someone about my development? Do I have opportunities to learn and grow? But there's 3 that don't neatly fit into those 3 categories of purpose and autonomy and mastery, right? There's, have I received recognition or praise for good work in the last 7 days? Does my supervisor, it's a very 90s term, right? Does my supervisor or someone at work seem to care about me as a person? And do I have a best friend at work? I love this last question because it's a masterclass in cultural differences. A lot of the original research here was done in America, and apparently this is a perfectly appropriate question to ask in America. I have done talks like this in Northern Europe a lot, including in Scandinavia, and everybody bristles at this question. I'm South African, so I'm going to be a helpful translator for you between Northern European culture and American culture right now. Where an American would say, I have a best friend at work, you need to hear, is there someone at work who, even if work was not paying for the beers or food, I would willingly spend time with and not necessarily only speak about work? Okay? That's how you got to hear it. Like, so there's someone here I don't completely hate is the Northern European version of do I have a best friend at work? I've been here 18 years. I love you all, but you're weird. That's all I'm saying. But this is really about kind of being respected and rewarded. Camille Fournier, who was CTO of Rent the Runway, calls this community, I call it inclusion. It's people feeling like they can be themselves and be successful. And that kind of set of 12 questions then does fit very neatly into those 4 things. And so I think when we're trying to create those conditions of success, we're trying to create space in which people feel that they believe in why, in what we're doing. They have autonomy, they get say in what, are we doing the right thing? And are we doing the thing right, which is the mastery side of it? And then they feel like they can belong, that they're not, they don't feel like the odd one out, that they can do good work here and be who they are. And I think underpinning that is probably like my most, let's say hippie belief, but like, I think every person's capable of being great at what they do. I really don't think people get up in the morning and go like, I'm aiming for just south of mediocre, and if I can mess everybody else up around me, my day will be perfect, right? Nobody thinks like that, or very few people think like that. And so accepting that every role people can be brilliant at, and every role we should enable people to be brilliant at. One of the things I was delighted to find it was already happening when I joined here was the investment in the great tooling for the customer ops team, which I think you may have heard about earlier today. Like companies that prioritize it being a great working environment and working experience for everybody, that don't think of some roles as undesirable roles or some roles as lesser roles, I think are much more likely to have teams that scale with challenge, that keep going and keep getting better as time goes on. My 4th reflection on scaling, and one of the things that I think we're doing a lot more of right now as we've grown so quickly in the last few months, is that, yeah, sorry, some of my characterization is very technical, but this thing that we can try to test things that are people related, but observing the actual effect is a bit more useful sometimes. And so we can plan really hard, but sometimes the impact we have might not equal our intent. And spotting that and dealing with it is really important, especially as you're scaling quickly. So when you think that you've told the company what matters and what we should focus on, and then you see people off doing something that you're like, why are they still doing that? Didn't we just say this is the thing that's important? Spotting that the way that you've communicated that refocus or communicated that change hasn't landed right is really important. And goes back to that thing about like recording context, getting really good at not just saying what we are doing, but also why we're doing it. So then people can make good interpretations and understand it really well. And kind of regularly checking in on that is important. And Monzo, we use things like, we do I've worked at a lot of places where they do an engagement survey for staff like once a year. We do one once a fortnight. We're asking people all the time. We use Peakon, we use Lattice, we have a culture of people giving each other feedback. It's much better when somebody feels able to tell someone this week that tell their teammate that they were upset, or that what they did seemed to undermine them, or it's going to hurt their growth or whatever, than them waiting 6 months for a review cycle. And encouraging that kind of checking in of how things are going is a really important part of the culture, I think. We also do retrospectives in teams, in collectives, which are sort of all, big collections of teams, and at the company level as well. And getting better at doing those. This is a talk by Jesse Link, who leads Twitter in London, but adding these kind of different techniques and different ways of stopping and going, like, how are things really going, and how could we continually improve on how we do things, not just what we're doing, it is really interesting. We've started to add some agile coaches into the team to help with that, because again, as we've gotten bigger and bigger, people who were doing that kind of Scrum Mastering, Agile coaching type work as their side interest are finding it's almost a full-time job these days. So we're starting to add some of those different specialist roles to get better and better at it. And then my last sort of reflection on how we think about scaling is remembering that how someone adds to the culture matters a lot more than how someone fits with it. I think we hear this term culture fit a lot in technology, in the industry, and it often just means, do I like them? Are they like me? I really worry about teams where they have going down the pub for a drink as part of an interview process. I think it helps people hire people who are just like them rather than people who are going to add something new. And so we've changed some of our, or we've evolved further our kind of interview processes and all those kind of things to make sure we're thinking about this, to make sure we think of it as not that every individual has to be everything, but that the unit of delivery is really the team. We get things, there's very little that we get done as individuals in kind of the modern working world. And so how do we make sure that individuals can answer this question of like, do I have the opportunity to do what I do best every day, but that the team as a whole has all of the strengths that it needs? We used to see an approach in how people were developed, how they talked about their progression, that you'd kind of find what they were terrible at and just focus on that. And that really just ends up with us leveling everybody out to kind of consistent mediocrity, right? If you ignore the things you're great at and just focus on the things you're terrible at, it takes a lot of effort to go from bad to okay. It probably takes just as much effort to go from okay to great. And in some ways, it'd be better to focus on the okay to great side of things, right? And so rather than trying to get everybody to be the same, we try to focus on how do we make sure the team's got everything it needs and get the most out of the differences between people, the most out of those different strengths. And that shift in perspective, I think, has increasingly been happening on me around the world. And if you look at any of the teal organizational stuff or the management 3.0 stuff, people are talking about this. But that old-fashioned approach of still going, what are you not great at? Okay, we're just going to focus on what you're not great at in terms of your development plan. Is still, sadly, very prevalent. It's been a feature here of when we're discussing very senior promotions, we actively ask in the executive team, are we making the most out of what this person's great at? Are we focusing too much on something which they might not be brilliant at, but we could supplement them with someone good in their team? They don't have to become great at everything. They just have to fix any weaknesses that are controlling, that are going to make them not able to succeed in their role. I think we need to kind of just keep remembering that. We're not interchangeable resource units. I tell people that if your manager calls you a resource, you get to call them overhead. They'll stop calling you a resource quite quickly if you do that. Some of them just won't get it, and then it'll be hilarious for everybody else for months. Totally have done that to people. But if we think of ourselves as we're colors or we're flavors, we're better in complement or in concert with each other. The Avengers, although I would watch the hell out of a 7 Hulks movie, like the Avengers are cool because they're good at different things, right? And by their powers combined. Yeah, you're mostly too young for a Captain Planet reference, aren't you? I'm sorry. Feeling very old right now. But we try to think about this as kind of about people and about roles as a matter of casting. If somebody is high potential and really good and they're not doing well right now, have we put them in the wrong place? Have we put them into a role that they're not getting the most out of what they're good at? They're not getting to do what they are best at every day. And where could we put them where they would excel? And one of the things that's fantastic about a rapidly scaling company is there's opportunity everywhere, right? Every team could do more if they had more people. Every area could do more if they just had a bit more analyst time or a bit more engineer time or a bit more design time. And so being able to maximize how much someone is a multiplier by getting the most out of what they're good at is really valuable. And so we focus on assembling great teams with complementary abilities, on finding if there's something missing in a team, we think about it as a team need for a different strength or a different capability rather than thinking about it as an individual missing something. it's quite a different way of managing, and a lot of kind of HR systems and people systems aren't particularly well set up for this approach, but we're fairly sure it's the right way of going about it, and we're working on the kind of tooling side of that to try and make sure that we find it easier to do as time goes on. And then the final point, which I'm almost to the end of my time, so I'm not going to go into much detail on, but focusing on that kind of crafting of inclusive environments. Most people, whether they're doing it consciously or not, they're asking all the time, am I expected here? Does it feel like someone like me has ever been here before? Am I respected here, and do I get the feeling I'm going to be taken seriously, be treated well? And then can I be myself and be successful here? Or can someone like me succeed here? And helping, as you've seen in the writing we've done about inclusion and similar, like helping the set of people who can say yes to those questions be as really as broad as possible, is something that we're really very focused on, making sure that, because we're trying to make money work for everyone, so we need everyone represented, right? If we don't have, if we're missing key perspectives, then we're never going to build the very best product that we can. And so it really does very genuinely matter to us. So in summary, as we think about this kind of how do we scale as we go, how do we make sure we don't lose the great things that we've had, but we don't. Tom said a brilliant thing at one of the very first all hands I was in. Somebody asked him, he was worried about us losing the culture, and he said, Monzo culture, we can't treat it like it's in a glass box in a museum exhibit. It's going to evolve as we evolve, and we have to actively embrace that. We're not going to try and hold the culture static like it was when there were 20 people or 50 people. We're going to evolve it, but we're going to keep true to what we think matters. And I think that's absolutely what we're trying to do. And so in summary, we're kind of trying to stay aware of these inflection points that exist and adapt, focus on the right things at the right time. Trying to remind ourselves all the time that don't repeat yourself is a great programming principle, but a terrible human communication one. That creating conditions of success is really important. And those of you who've been to some other events might have seen like the way we do engineering management here is quite different because of that, because we think investing in that kind of success condition stuff is super important for people to succeed and people to keep leveling up as the company grows and the expectations on them grow. To remember that like sometimes it's easier to observe than to test with human stuff, and then that culture add is a lot more important than culture fit. Thank you all very much. I think we're not doing live questions, but I'm on Twitter. My DMs are open. I'll hang around a little bit afterwards if anybody's got a question in person. And thank you all very much for being here. I don't know who I'm handing back over to. Here we go.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So that's it. We've come to the end of the day. If you do want to continue socializing, you can head over to Code Node. I think there's a bar over there. I think it's open till 6. So feel free to head over. Just a couple of thank yous before we go. Thank you so much to our incredible community team who put this all together, made this all possible. It's been a lot of hard work. You're amazing. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all our incredible speakers. These events and these slides don't just put themselves together. People put a lot of time and effort into them. So thank you so much for coming and imparting some wisdom on both me and everyone else. Thank you. And finally, and most importantly, thank you so much to all of you. As we've said many, many times, none of this would have been possible without any of you. Monzo probably wouldn't be here today without any of you. And it definitely wouldn't be the bank that it is without all of you. So one final massive round of applause for all of you. I hope you have a good time. Go out and enjoy the sunshine and come back maybe next year. Thank you.
Yay.